Global Conservation Corps presents the Rhino Man podcast. I'm John Jerko, your host, and one of the directors of Rhino Man the movie. This podcast series is a way for me to interview top conservationists on the topics of rhinos, the poaching crisis, the importance of rangers, and community engagement, all as a way to create awareness around these issues and to promote the coming release of our documentary film. In this episode, I'm talking with Tom Medema. Tom is the co-founder of Rally for Rangers, whose mission is to protect the world's special places by empowering rangers around the world with new motorcycle equipment. Tom was born in Michigan in the United States and developed a passion for national parks at a young age while on family vacations throughout the American West. This passion turned into a career as a park ranger spanning over 33 years. In this conversation, we talk about how Tom found himself on his first ride through Mongolia and the early beginnings of Rally for Rangers. We dive deep into the importance of rangers, the support they need to do their work, and their passion for this calling. We go into some of the epic adventures of past rallies, how you can get involved, and talk about their new film, A Rally for Rangers. Tom was full of energy and passion, and his stories make you want to go on your own adventures and to support the Rangers. Before we jump in, I'd like to ask you, as always, for you to please subscribe to and rate the show on your favorite podcast platform, and to share it on social media and with your friends. With your support, the Rhino Man podcast can continue to grow. Now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Tom Medema. All right, Tom, welcome to the Rhino Man podcast. It's a real honor to have you on here.
Thanks, man. It's really good to be here, John. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like we've got so much to dive into. And, I heard about you and Rally for Rangers from our mutual friend, Sean Wilmore from Thin Green Line. And I think he was telling me about this, I don't know, last year we were in Botswana for the African Ranger Congress, and he was explaining it, and I was like, whoa, this sounds like an amazing project. Something I have no motorcycle skills, lots of bicycle skills, but no motorcycle skills, so I'd have to do some work. But I was like, it sounds like an epic adventure and just such a great cause. The Rangers are so close to my heart, so I'm really excited to be having this chat with you.
Yeah, same. Yeah, Sean's a great connector. He's done amazing work for Rangers around the world. I was fortunate to see him and spend time with him in Nepal a few years ago, where we really started talking about this project together. And now this year he's signed up to join us in Mongolia. So Sean's a great champion for Rangers and the work that they all do.
Were you in Nepal at the World Ranger Congress?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That's where we met. And we donated 15 bikes there with 500 Rangers from all over the world. And it was a game changer for us because everybody there was like, wait, we want this too. And so we really got a long line of need after going to the World Ranger Congress in Chitwan in 2019. It was amazing. And it's in our film. It's featured in our film as well.
Yeah, I might be in the background of some of those shots because I was actually there as well.
Oh, you were there.
And it's okay. Like as you're saying this, I'm like, oh yeah, I do remember someone delivering bikes. I do remember. For me, it was still like somewhat early in this project, my connection to Rhino Man and like learning about the Rangers. But I remember going to the Congress and all these people that I had met in some capacity then. Like 2-3 years later, I'm like, oh yeah, I did meet you. I just had no clue like who you were and how you connected into this. And so it's wild because I saw the trailer and I was like, those shots of those Rangers look like they were in Nepal. I wonder if he was there. So yeah, it's all connecting for me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, when you see the feature, when you see the full film, you'll see, Sean's in there and quite a few others that we interviewed there. And I'm sure you did lots of interviews, there as well. Yeah, it was a great Congress, great opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, before we dive into your work, maybe with that Congress, I mean, what do you think? Because we'll talk about it later. Your background as a Ranger as well, and just you've had such a connection to Rangers throughout your whole life. A Congress like that, what are the benefits in bringing together Rangers from around the world to have that type of interaction?
Yeah, there's really nothing like it, and that was my first World Ranger Congress, even the one that we hosted here in Estes Park at Rocky Mountain National Park. Years before that, I wasn't able to attend. And so it was really special. And to bring together hundreds of Rangers from 70, 80 countries to learn, but more than anything, to commune with each other and to share those challenges, that a lot of times Rangers don't have a lot of support where they live, in their communities and elsewhere from their government. And so to be able to come together and feel that support in that community with other Rangers who are facing similar challenges, it's priceless. And so it's really exciting that there's so much support for it and that International Ranger Federation and others, support that kind of work because there's just no other way. And then, of course, the training component of it, learning, sharing information, all of that is important. But I got to say, for me, that the community element is inspiring and just keeps you going till the next time, that you can get together and share as well. So there's so many benefits and values to those Congress events that I'm anxious for whenever my next one is.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, that was, like I said, it was so new to me. So I was trying to make some connections, and I was actually doing a little bit of video for Rowit and WWF at the time for the Congress. So I was kind of distracted by that. But when I went to the African Ranger Congress in Botswana this past year, it's just, you really do feel that connection and community building. And like you're saying, for so many Rangers in a lot of places, I'm sure in Mongolia, which we're going to talk about a lot, which I haven't experienced, but there's this distance and separation just naturally and geographically that people have. So it's to be able to come together and connect with people from different parts of the world or different parts of the continent. It just allows you to feel like you're a part of something bigger and create those friendships and bonds. So it's cool. I wish I would have met you there, but it's never too late.
Next time.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
So let's dive into a rally for Rangers, and maybe you can just kind of give us a quick overview of what it is and what your role is. And then I'd love to dive into some of the history and how this all came about.
Yeah, for sure. Rally for Rangers is a nonprofit. It's a project of the Mongol Ecology Center. And Mongol Ecology Center was formed by a woman by the name of Ono Baku in Mongolia to help their developing parks in that country, because Mongolia, of course, just became its own democracy in 1992 with the fall of the Soviet Union. And so their national parks are really just born since 1992 as a nation. So that organization is really helping with development, sustainable development of the environment there, because extraction is so big, grazing, things like that are so big there, and of course poaching and things like that are problematic. So, and then the Rally for Rangers concept came along just as part of that. There was a retired U.S. park ranger, Bob McIntosh. And as I'm sure you know from your work, the U.S. National Park System is one of the oldest in the world, has been helping other nations grow their park systems for decades. And especially the retirees, they have the time and the ability to travel. And so they get with different organizations and they go around the world to help, with sustainable park development. And so Robert McIntosh, who was a career National Park Service ranger, superintendent, and otherwise retired, and was working with the Mongol Ecology Center in 2013 at Lake Hovsgol National Park, the northern area of Mongolia, beautiful, gorgeous, huge body of water, the headwaters of Lake Baikal. And they were talking about how to make this not turn into something that was unsustainable and not unrestricted development and unrestricted access, and how do we control the development here to protect this incredible lake. So while they were having this conversation with the chief ranger up there, he was with Ono, Mongol Ecology Center, and Ono's husband, Wesley. And as they were there having that conversation, the chief ranger they were working with got called away because there was a tourist who was, breaking the rules, and he had to jump on his old motorcycle and go deal with this. And right in front of the three of them from the Mongol Ecology Center, this guy's bike just fell apart and he couldn't do his job. And McIntosh, Bob, we call him Mac, he was just furious, just so frustrated at the condition of the equipment, at the lack of support. In that moment, he committed to come back the next year and ride a motorcycle to give it, to this park ranger. It was just kind of just a harebrained idea, just on the, spur of the moment, and was just inspired and angry and said, I'm going to bring you a motorcycle next year. And Wesley, he was with him, also a rider, said that actually could work. Let's do that. And then they talked to a bunch of other colleagues and riders back here in the US, particularly in the Bay Area. And a year later, there were 15 of us that showed up. I was one of the last people invited onto that first rally. And it was just meant to be a one-off. It was a campaign called the Blue Waves Campaign, and Rally for Rangers wasn't even in the swirl yet. And after that, myself, Wesley, and McIntosh were kind of like, this is a thing. This could become something. Let's do it again next year. And so we came back the following year with 20 motorcycles. And this concept of Rally for Rangers was born. And we had to take a pause in 2016 because it was just going too fast. We were like, what are we doing here? This really has the potential. And so here we are, 8-9 years later, 160 bikes plus later, 7 countries, whatever it is, continues to grow. And it's become its own taken on a life of its own. So that's kind of the quickfire history of how Rally for Rangers came to be, but it's really about getting new equipment, primarily new transportation, into the hands of park rangers, because we know that the equipment they have is substandard. And so we're elevating the quality of the equipment they have, and that keeps them safer. It helps them do their job better. And it's exciting, certainly, how it's taken off.
Can you talk to that a bit from your perspective? I'm planning on having Chris Galliers from the International Ranger Federation on here to talk a little bit more on the global perspective, but just I don't think people realize how tough the job can be for a lot of rangers in different places because of lack of funding or resources. And motorcycles is one part of a lot of equipment that people need that they just don't have. I don't know if you can talk to that a bit, and maybe even just like you coming to this awareness and understanding. It may have been years before Rally for Rangers, but yeah, what's that situation like, and why is it important to help rangers get this equipment?
Yeah, for sure. Well, let's take a look right here in the U.S. We talked about that before. United States national parks, one of the most well-funded national park systems on the globe, right? Still generates $300 to $400 million a year plus in philanthropic benefit to the park. Because even with all the money given from the U.S. Congress, it's still not enough for the rangers to have everything they need, for everybody to have the housing they need, the tools, the equipment, the trails, right? And so even in the United States, there isn't enough funding to meet the demand and the need. Now consider some of these other countries where there's almost no funding from the government. The rangers are expected to do things on their own. They're expected to pay for their own fuel, their own gasoline, come up with their own vehicles, and take care of their own weapons and all these other things that they have to contend with, in addition to the increased danger they face relative to dangers faced, in North America and other kind of safer places to be a park ranger. And so you can see right away, what the challenges would be. And so transportation happens to be one that we focus on because that's our niche with motorcycle enthusiasts. But we know communications equipment, GPS equipment, remote sensing cameras, right? All the weapons, all the different things that rangers need, so expensive and so difficult for them. Even things like health and life insurance, which is where, the International Ranger Foundation, Thin Green Line, Chris, Sean, and others come into play. Needs across the board for rangers in Asia, Africa, South America, that just really help them kind of create a little bit of a higher standard, both of just living in existence, but also higher success rates for those rangers in the work that they're doing. Because that's the other thing we like to talk about, and I'm sure you do too, that the work of the rangers benefits everyone on the planet. Benefits from increased biodiversity, from the protection of cultural heritage. And so for them not to have the basic tools they need to do that hurts all of us. And that's where, where we kind of step in to fill that niche. But so transportation, there are places where rangers have to use bicycles. There are places where they're using substandard motorcycles that don't work or that are unsafe. And in addition to other needs and other kind of ways that they have to get around. So that's why we've kind of focused on that element of it and really getting them higher quality equipment to get from point A to point B faster, to compete with poaching more effectively, and get back home to their families more safely.
Yeah, it's so great. And there's so many places. Most of these protected areas are huge spaces. And the reality is, in a lot of places, there aren't really enough rangers to cover them either. So you've got such a huge amount of land that you have to protect as a ranger. And if you don't have that transportation or way to get around, you're just not able to do your job. So it's such a great story of how this all started. And I can only imagine that ranger, as he's trying to go do his job, and he's got, these new buddies from another country, and it's just like, oh man, it's kind of heartbreaking. So it's just, really beautiful what you guys are doing. I'm curious, how did they wrangle you into this at the beginning? What was, did you get a phone call, or like how did you get sucked into this?
Yeah, no, for me, I was working in Yosemite National Park, and one of the most fun parts of any time I've spent in the Park Service is hosting international visitors, going all the way back to my time as a seasonal ranger at Rocky Mountain National Park in the early 90s, when I remember the first ever international hosting I did was a woman from the Russian Department of Environment. So all the way from that very beginning of my career, hosting people from other countries and just learning about how they're managing their parks before I even started traveling internationally was really special. So when when I was in Yosemite, asked if I wanted to meet with a delegation from Mongolia that was coming, and I was like, Mongolia, like that's mysterious. That's super interesting and captivating. Not a place I'd ever thought of going. Maybe would have had a hard time exactly finding it on a map at that time. And this was in May of 2014. And I was like, absolutely. Anytime I get a request to meet with an international delegation, I want to take it because I just love meeting them. I love hearing their stories and sharing. So that happened to be Ono and McIntosh and a couple of others. And we were just talking about work, about their development of their parks and how they do education, interpretation, junior ranger programs, things like that. And towards the end, I don't even remember how it came up, but so one of them mentioned they were doing this motorcycle rally in July. And I was like, whoa, stop, full stop. You're going to bring motorcycles to park rangers in Mongolia? Like that's a thing? And they said, yeah, it is. Well, why, do you ride? I said, yeah, I ride. And like a day later, they said, we just had somebody back out. Would you like to go? And I was like, you mean 6 weeks from now, go to Mongolia and ride a motorcycle? I was like, it was crazy to think that was even possible. I had never ridden a motorcycle off-road before. I'd ridden motorcycles for a long time, but never off-road. And so all I had to do was raise $5,000 and get my, immunizations and get my wife's okay. And all of that fell into place. My family supported me and friends. And I borrowed a friend's motorcycle and did a few hours on local fire roads. And I can do this. I didn't know anyone, other than the couple people I'd met. I didn't know any of the other riders. They were mostly friends from the Bay Area. It was quite a thing to be just dropped in Mongolia for the first time ever. I was terrified, nervous, excited, all of it. And yeah, so that's kind of how it came to be for me. It was just a chance meeting with a Mongolian delegation, and this came up, and that was it. Six weeks later, my life was changed forever.
Yeah, I feel like that's how some of the best experiences in life happen sometimes. You just out of left field, and it's kind of, you're given this option. Do I do this thing that's, most people are going to think is crazy? It's like, I wasn't planning it, but it looks like this changed your life in so many amazing ways.
Yeah, that's, I reflect on that a lot when I do, plenty of coaching and mentoring and stuff over time, especially now that I'm kind of old and haggard. And when I talk to students and others, beginning their career, I'm like, just say yes. Whatever comes along, just say yes. And that idea of I've been getting into this kind of abundance versus scarcity mindset stuff. And so many people exist with that scarcity mindset that I don't have the money, I don't have the time, I don't, and that's never really been my thought process, but I've been leaning into that more, let's see, let's try, and failure is part of learning and whatever. So yeah, that it is just saying yes to something, and saying yes to things like that has just continued to change my life in new and amazing ways, over many, many years. So
yeah, I feel like it's not that often that you regret doing something, as long as it's not, some criminal act. Yes. But you usually regret the things that you say, I should have done that. And, what if I would have? And yeah, it's just, that's such a inspiring little story there, just about how this all happened.
I'll give you a quick example of one you do regret. I decided that I can do a trailer conversion to haul my motorcycle and camp in and around like that. YouTube videos galore on how you can do your own trailer conversion, electrical and insulation and all that stuff. I can't.
Yeah, it should be easy.
So I have stopped and turned it over to others. I learned so much, from saying yes to that. So I don't truly regret it. I learned a lot.
Yeah, you found some limits.
You don't always succeed, but failure is part of growth, always.
Exactly. Can you talk a bit about that first trip for you? Because it sounds like it was pretty seminal in creating, this organization and how it ended up developing. But what was that like, getting all these guys, and I don't know if there were some gals on that first trip, down on the ground, and how many days was it? What was the experience like? What was it like when you guys delivered these motorcycles at the other end?
Yeah, it was remarkable. I mean, for me personally, just the food. In my first night there's horse meat on the restaurant table,
Mm.
and I'm like, what do I do with that? I don't even know how to, like just a whole different experience of, from just culinary culture, all of it. You don't want to do the wrong thing. You want to understand, the culture you're in. So, and that was also, on speed, right? Was getting those 6 weeks of learning how to visit Mongolia, getting all the books, reading about the, Genghis Khan history and the, the religion and Buddhism there. And just all of that cultural awareness was just, again, life-changing for me because I hadn't never visited Asia and just didn't understand the culture well. So that was part of it, was just being prepared to come in and then trying to be healthy, with a stomach that's not ironclad ready for whatever's coming at me, and all the cultural traditions and things like that. Right at the very beginning, you're getting arag, fermented mare's milk.
Mm.
So we were there during their annual Naadam festival, and I was told right away, don't swallow it. Just touch it to your lips and pass it on. And other people are, doing the heavy and don't drink the water, right? Bottled water only. And I've got some friends on that trip who went and filled their camelbacks in a local spring.
Uh-huh.
Well, they were laid out for 2+ days, so I just got good advice, and I listened to the advice as well.
It's important.
Yes. So, but that first day on the motorcycle is one that I'll never forget. I'm so grateful I had the GoPro with me. I actually did my own kind of personal film on the project, self-interviewing and stuff that I had seen on Long Way Around, actually, with those guys doing their own self-interview. And so I've got quite a narrative of that whole trip. That first day, just getting out of the city of Ulaanbaatar, which is, again, traffic, and during this festival was terrifying. To get 15 of us navigated through traffic for hours. And then we hit the off-road terrain. We were going so fast, and I immediately knew that I was in over my head and just kind of drifted towards the back. And within the first hour, a rider in front of me, Hans, who is a German national, lives in the Bay Area, went over his handlebars, broke his collarbone.
Oof.
So we had an extraction within the first off-road hour on the first day. And I was just gripped with fear at that point. I'm like, I'm next.
Yeah.
So that the first couple of days, I just hung towards the back, and I was certainly in amazement all the time. I found myself weeping in my helmet routinely, not just out of fear, but as a herd of horses are just galloping along and across the path in front of you. And you're just like, I'm on a motorcycle. I'm in Mongolia. Like I could not really capture the idea in my head. But we had some good support with us, and I kept getting some good advice on how to ride in this terrain. And I'm a lifelong alpine skier, and was a racer in school and a coach and a PSI certified instructor and all these things. So skiing is my life. And at some point, somebody reminded me that a lot of pro skiers at that time, Bodie Miller and others, they ride motocross in the off season or dirt bikes because the skills are directly transferable. And I started to internalize that, and I started to visualize myself, whether I'm in powder and the bumps or whatever I'm doing. And I started to become one with the bike. And all of a sudden, the fear became fun. I remember a left-hand turn. One single left-hand turn where I properly weighted my pegs, laid the bike over, had my position, everything. And I was like, I can do this. And just started having, a great time until we got to the sand. We hit sand dunes. And if you've never ridden a motorcycle in sand, it is a whole different thing than riding it in most any other condition. And so then I just started flopping and floundering and, and had to learn that whole thing. And that became fun after a while too. So, again, you're just 10-hour days, just the fatigue is extraordinary. And that just increases the danger as well, right? So it was about 10 days on the bike to get from Ulaanbaatar up to Lake Hovsgol, because we're touring some parks and other sites along the way. That's the other part of the rally. Some people a lot of people actually have asked the question, why don't you just ship the bikes there? They need new motorcycles, just ship them there. I was like, well, we could try that, but we could never raise money on that. It just, when you go hat in hand and ask your friends and family to, hey, we're going to support these rangers and send them some bikes, some people might give you some money. But if you say, I'm going to go there, I'm going to take 2 weeks off of work, and I'm going to contribute this money and my time, and I'm going to personally deliver that bike on our behalf, people's eyes, they're like, what? Like, really? And the money flows, right? Same thing with a 10K for cancer or anything like that where you're participating. It is a completely different fundraising model. And so that's the only way it works. And so you want to encourage riders also to contribute their time. It's a major commitment. $11,000, 2 weeks of your life, vacation. And so there has to be something enticing there too. So 10 days riding in a foreign land and seeing the rangers, meeting them along the way in their parks. And so that's part of the journey. And then at the end, and this is the most, there's actually a scene of me bawling in my helmet as we approach the rangers lined up in front of us. As after this 10-day journey, you're just dog-ass tired, you're emotional, and you come to their park and they're standing there waiting for you, 15 of them in a line. And there's 15 of you that come rolling in. And, you hug each other and you're bringing, like I think you referenced earlier, these people from all over the world have just come to the deepest parts of Mongolia for me as a ranger to bring me this new tool. Like, they're overwhelmed, you're overwhelmed. It's incredibly powerful. And then we finish with a donation ceremony after we clean the bikes. We do some training with the rangers. They get a tour of the bike by a mechanic. And then we have some cultural dance and song and a ceremony. We give them the motorcycles. Everybody cries. And then we've got the arduous journey to get back home and they go back to work. That's that first rally in a nutshell for me. It was just extraordinarily overwhelming experience in virtually every conceivable way. But at the same time, this is it. Like, this is not what I do for a living. This is what I live to do. And from there, it just became part of my life.
Yeah, it sounds like just such an amazing journey. And I think you're right too. I'm sure you probably do get pushback where people are like, why don't you just give the bikes to them or the money? But I feel like so much of, fundraising, but then also just like life and feeling a part of something is the story that's being told. And I think the only way to get people's attention now is to tell a compelling story. And the Rangers alone have such amazing and varied stories and the work they're doing. I mean, that's a big part of what we're doing is telling Ranger stories. And to be able to capture that along with this adventure that you're kind of going on, and it's almost like a spiritual journey in some ways. It feels like, I haven't done this, but that's what kind of attracts me to it, because you're getting to experience the land, you're getting to experience these people that you're with for 10 days, and then meeting these rangers. And I think I can imagine the rangers just being like, wow, these people come across the world to do this. And that ceremony, I haven't watched your film that's out. We could talk more about that, but I did see, I think it was like a short Vimeo of one of the trips. And there, you show a little bit of that ceremony at the end, and I was getting tears in my eyes just watching, because I've had a lot of connections with rangers, and just to see that handover and what it means for them in terms of being able to have this equipment, and maybe you can talk to this a little bit more too, is just like how a lot of these rangers in different parts of the world view their work. It's usually more than just work for them. It's not a job. It's much bigger. So maybe you can talk to that a little bit, and then I've got some more things based on what you just said to dig into.
Yeah. And one other thing about what you said is, and the other benefit of the way that this is done is that it builds the community of support. Because all of those people that are individually following and donating to each one of those 15 riders, they're a force multiplier. They're following every day. They're watching the social posts. They want to see them in the film. Like, it's a whole thing that would not be there if it was just a cash transaction. It's not, right? And so so some people, of course, can just write a check to join, and that's great. We appreciate that, but it's almost better if somebody has to do fundraising, because that just grows the community and grows the community of support and spreads the word. So there's another answer to that. Again, that same question about why not just send the money and the bikes. It's just a completely different thing. But that's what you'll see in the film, whenever people see the film eventually, and is why rangers do this work. It's very personal to them. And there's some really compelling stories out there. I saw one that's featured in another film that's out right now. And we met somebody on our Car Ooze 2019 rally who was a poacher turned ranger. That's a compelling story. Each time it happens, when somebody recognizes, the error of their ways, and not only that, but then commits to the opposite, that's super powerful. But so many of them, in the interviews that we've done with the rangers over there, it's their home, it's their belief system, it's their whole world, is the land that they live in. in the animals that they commune with, and the landscapes, the culture. It's part of who they are. And so for them, there couldn't be any higher calling. And that's true of rangers pretty much everywhere. We all can agree that, the ranger life is not the life to become, a wealthy landlord. We joke a lot about, rangers get paid in sunsets, right? And that, of course, isn't entirely true. However, there aren't, rangers out there who are making the wages of so many other things that they could be doing. And so it is passion-driven work. And so that's what commits so many people to doing it. And that's the only reason that it's successful, is because there isn't enough money behind it to pay the wages that are deserved. But people are so passionate about what they're doing, and they believe so strongly in it. It's for their family, it's for the next generation and the generation beyond that. And so that's been part of the beauty. And that's why the community of rangers is so strong, because it's not linked just by duties. It's linked by heart and by passion and, commitment to furtherance of these goals wherever you are in the world. That is a bond that is created across the spectrum for rangers everywhere.
Yeah, and I think that's why it's so powerful to get these stories out there, because there's not too many people that have jobs that feel that way about their work, that it's actually influencing the world in that kind of way. I mean, not everybody, of course, but a lot of people don't have that. And being able to support rangers wherever in the world, like you're saying, it impacts all of us. The work they're doing is impacting all of us, because whether it's the Amazon rainforest or, some wildlife in a desert somewhere or wherever, I mean, somehow all, this planet is interconnected in so many ways that we don't even know yet. And just by supporting the people that are protecting that and doing that work, it's really, supporting your own community. I think that's something we need to move towards, is more of that global mentality in terms of protecting our planet. It's really special.
Yeah. And I think we've seen that, over time, and certainly social media, film, the globe is shrinking, as they say, and we're becoming more and more interconnected all the time. And so the work becomes more important than ever. And our population is growing, just so dramatically and terrifyingly in some ways that, a lot of those answers are held in the natural environment, answers for medicine, answers for food, answers for long-term sustainability. And those things, they have to be protected, and rangers are in the front line of doing that protection.
So how has this developed over the years? We talked a lot about that first trip. How have things changed? Where are things going? What kind of impact are you seeing? I feel like there's a lot of different things we could talk about, but what's happened?
I think I mentioned after those first couple of years, we took a pause because we just realized we were onto something, and we just needed to get some structure and understanding around it. And so then we resumed in 2017. And the second year, we thought the first year was so great. Let's do 20 bikes. The second year, that was way too many. Just trying to stick together with a string of 20 riders of differing abilities. And if you ever go to Mongolia, or when you see the film and you look at riding there, I mean, it's really not a road system per se. It's just a spider web of trails, and you can become separated so easily. And so just so many reasons to stick together. And that was too much. And so 2017, we were going to Akan Tengger, to spiritual mountain in the center of Mongolia. And we said, let's just go with 10. They have 10 rangers. Let's do 10 bikes. And that was great. But that was really on the bottom end of what's sustainable to afford to do a rally. All the costs that go into scoping the trip and, supporting the trip and all of that. So we settled back on 15, and that's what we've done virtually every time since then. And starting in 2018, then we started doing 2 a year. That's the other decision we made in 2017, was like, well, that we need to start adding some other countries, perhaps. We've got some interest in other countries. There are certainly riders who want to ride all over the world. And so what if we try to do 2 a year? And so that was a stretch goal for us in 2018. And we reached out to the Park Service in Argentina, and they accepted us. And so we added Patagonia in 2018. We do Mongolia every year. That's our home base. And we will do Mongolia every year in perpetuity, because even now the motorcycles we brought in 2014 are aging out. And so we still have more places to bring new bikes that we haven't yet, but we also are going to start replacing bikes, that we brought maybe a decade ago. So Mongolia, where Mongol Ecology Center is based, and where my partner in this effort, Wesley, lives, like that's every year. And then we're adding a new country then each year. So Argentina was a great success, 15 motorcycles for Parks Argentina. The ceremony was held at Los Glaciares National Park as the glacier was calving in the background and these just ice is crashing into the water as we're having this ceremony. I'll never forget it. It was like so distracting, but remarkable there. And then the concept for the World Ranger Congress in Nepal in 2019 surfaced at some point, and we're like, what would that be like? Like that, what could we do? And so we reached out to Rowett, and WWF became our NGO, because we have to have an NGO in every country. So that's the other challenge. If you're going to do the procurement of motorcycles, and we always procure locally. We're not shipping them in. We're not bringing our own. Right? We want to support the local economy. So we buy the motorcycles in country. Well, an organization from Mongolia cannot buy 15 bikes in Argentina. Doesn't work that way. We've got to find an NGO in country and then transfer the money to that NGO. They have to do the purchase agreement, the titling, licensing, insurance, all that has to be done in country. So it's really complicated to execute an international event. And so in Chitwan in 2019 in Nepal, it was Rowett and WWF stepped into that role. WWF, I believe, helped us in Bhutan, and then other organizations coming up in Africa and Peru. Peru we did this past year. So we kind of figured that out in Argentina. That was an incredibly challenging trip. So many logistics, trying it for the first time in a different country, different brand of motorcycle, different nonprofit to work with, different landscape, different language. But the World Ranger Congress was such a unique target for us to be able to do the donation ceremony at the Congress in front of 500 Rangers from all over the world was a game changer. And Sean and Chris and Rowett were so welcoming of us that we then had a line of people, right? Because as soon as Rangers from Congo, from Indonesia, from Central America who were there saw this, they came right up to us and said, we're next. Like, how do we, and so we have a pretty long list of interest now from countries all over the world, which is great. And we hope at some point maybe to grow beyond 2 a year. We did 3 last year, but that was only because Bhutan got pushed forward a year. So there's no shortage. We know the need is there, right? So now it's just up to our ability and the capacity to find enough riders to do this work worldwide. We know they're out there. They just don't know about us yet. So we're doing a lot with the film premiere this year and going to events and things like that to raise awareness for who we are so that adventure riders around the world can volunteer to sign up and join us and do the fundraising for that. And so we continue to expand. And we took a pause in 2020, of course, because of COVID. And then we did Mongolia in 2021 in the middle of COVID. We were the first tourists allowed back into Mongolia since 2020. And that was just a scary proposition, right? What happens if somebody tests positive on the trip? And some of our Rangers tested positive right before the donation ceremony. And it was incredibly fraught and challenging and amazing, in its own way. And so this year, then our first time in Africa and our first time supporting community Rangers. So this was something that was somewhat new to me, was the idea, that because we don't have community Rangers in North America that I'm aware of, the Park Rangers Authority ends at the boundary. Well, the wildlife, don't tend to care about the boundary.
Yeah.
And so the minute they step out of the park, they're more actively being poached. So there are communities in Africa, and we're going to Namibia, where there are community ranger organizations who are patrolling outside the boundaries of the park, supporting the rangers and helping, protect outside. So we're bringing 15 motorcycles to a community ranger group in Namibia in July of this year. And that'll be our first venture onto the African continent and our first venture with community rangers. So super excited about that. And then again, continuing to plan and look ahead at World Ranger Congresses that are upcoming and hopefully getting involved there again as well. So, like I said, it's still very much a work in progress. It's an all volunteer program. It's the other thing that's important. I got a full-time job. My partner Wesley runs a company called Trend Digital. He's got a full-time job. This is evenings and weekends, and we've been successful, even in spite of that. And so we feel really fortunate that we've gotten to this point. And we hope at some point to grow the organization to the point where we can actually hire staff and it can become perhaps its own NGO. But we're just not at that point yet.
Just thinking about the logistics that go into just one of these trips. How do you guys work that out in terms of figuring out where you're going to go and the routes and all of that?
Yeah, so that's where some of the Mongol Ecology Center staff come into play. They support us and strongly, of course, as a project of theirs. But one of the president of the Mongol Ecology Center right now, his name is Badro Yandan, and he has a company called Mongolia Quest. And so he knows and has done tours all over Mongolia, but he's also a tour company operator. So he understands, how to manage the logistics. So we hire tour companies in each country because we need guides. We have the rangers that guide us in many cases, but in other cases, we need the support of a tour company. So we will hire out a tour company in Peru, which was in May of last year. We hired a local motorcycle tour company. So they're used to guiding motorcycle trips around their country. And so and again, supporting that economy, supporting that, that local tour company is part of the deal. And that's all part of the overhead, that goes into executing a rally. And so going through choosing the choice of routes, and I'll reflect back on Patagonia. I have to take responsibility. Like, we need to go to Ushuaia. We've got to get to the southern tip. We've got to get to the Tierra del Fuego National Park, which is down there on the tip. Like, our riders are going to want to do that. We want to go to Torres del, which is in Chile. What about border crossings? And so we had so many complications that we added just because we wanted to see these different national parks and understand the challenges of those parks, but the logistics of getting from one place to another. In Peru, the example there, which was remarkable, because we were in a different national park every day in Peru, but that meant that we spent more time on pavement because we simply couldn't get from Lima to the rainforest in the Amazon and see all these parks and meet all these rangers if we were doing it off-road. It would have been too slow. So we just adaptability, flexibility every time. And you can be guaranteed every time that something will go wrong, right? That is the core of adventure. Exactly. If everything goes as planned, it's not an adventure. And so there is a singular moment or two from every rally. I think I need to write a book on these moments at some point. In 2015, it was what we call the Island of Despair. We were traveling over Jigleg Pass, and it was pouring rain as we're climbing the pass. And we reached a patch of high ground, and the river in front of us was too swollen to cross. We couldn't go where we needed to go. And so we sat and we waited to figure out what to do. By the time we figured out we should go back, we couldn't go back. The river had come around behind us, and we ended up on a patch of high ground about the size of a football field for 3 days. We set up camp there. We started collecting rainwater at some point. We were trying to stay occupied. It was something else, and then finally we carried the motorcycles across the river when the river subsided after a couple of days. Another example where we got separated from all of our gear. That corner system that we're supposed to use fell apart. So all of our support vehicles, all of our food, all of our camping gear, clothing, all went hours and hours that way, and we went this way. And all of a sudden it's dark, it's 10 o'clock at night, and there's just one Kazakh family living in a ger up on the side of a mountain, and all 15 of us roll up to this Kazakh ger. Young family, 2 small kids, maybe 4 and 5 years old, and a husband and wife. And here 15 motorcycles come rolling up at 10 o'clock at night, right? Like, what's going to happen in the States if that happens, right? You lock the doors. That's not what they did. They moved out so we could move in. If we needed to sleep in their gear, they were prepared to sleep out. They put out every bit of food they had. We couldn't even speak the language because they were speaking Kazakh and we had a Mongolian translator. So, those moments happen on every rally. There's a story like that is just truly, and this, again, why you go, is to truly invest in the adventure, to learn the culture. And so the logistics, getting back to your question, like, no matter how much you plan, those kind of things are going to happen. Bridges are going to be out. Floods are going to happen. You're going to get separated from your gear. Crashes and injuries are going to happen. Like, things are going to happen. And so everybody that comes on the trip, from the very first phone call we have with every rider, adaptability, flexibility, again and again and again, because it's not a vacation. Mm-hmm. This is a volunteer work trip. And, you need to be prepared for most anything.
Yeah. So the Island of Despair, this wasn't a name that was on a map. This was something that happened.
That's what we call it. Yes. Yes. Yeah. We've got names for all incredible. These things. And in 2019, it was the ferry to nowhere. We had a ferry booked waiting for us. It was basically just a current driven ferry, a catamaran that uses the current to go back and forth. And so we had to get across on this. Well, we got there and the ferry owner wasn't there. And we're stuck. We're sitting go. We can't move on. So we're like, well, we can figure this out. Let's just go. Let's just do it ourselves. So we loaded up motorcycles. We started across, got halfway across the river, and realized that the ferry was locked by cable underneath. So you couldn't steal a ferry ride. So we had to navigate back to shore and wait till the following day when the ferry captain finally showed up. So yeah, again, there are just those kind of terrific stories that in the moment are just infuriating and miserable, but that's all you talk about after the fact, right? Are those moments.
And those moments too just build that camaraderie between everyone on that ride. I mean,
they sure do.
It's always going through hardship. It creates stronger bonds.
Yeah, exactly. And it also gives you insight into what these rangers deal with every day.
Yeah.
Every day, the hardships they have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. And just talking about, meeting these different people and people taking you in. I did back in 2014. I lived in LA for a couple of years. And then at the end of that, I decided to do kind of a fun trip to end it all as I was moving back east. And I did a bicycle trip from Vancouver all the way down to Ensenada, Mexico. And it's, I did a lot of camping along the way too, mostly camping, a couple Airbnbs and things. But, every day I feel like you're saying, something happened that was either unexpected or someone did something that was just like, it just kind of reconnects you to the generosity of the human race. You're like, oh, like people really do care. When, a stranger comes into town, they're like, what are you doing here? How can I help? What's going on? Or you're on this trip? What? It just kind of rekindles that spirit and that connection with, people that you don't know around the world. And what, day to day, you're kind of walking past strangers and you're ignoring them because you're just so focused on what you're doing. But there's just this world of possibilities with people and kindness that's out there that something like this really brings out. So hearing those stories is super special.
Yeah, for sure.
Another thing you said, you're on these trips, you're meeting a lot of rangers, seeing different national parks. What's that part of the experience like? Are you sitting down, having conversations with rangers in different places, getting tours of different parts of some of these parks? I mean, some of these you have a long journey, so you got to get to a destination, but what's that experience like when you're connecting with those local rangers in those local parks?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, there are times when we'll stop in a ranger's, you've heard me say gear. The gear is the Mongolian yurt, the family dwelling, that fabric gear that is portable, they're nomadic people. And so sitting in there with the rangers and their family and getting translation through about some of the challenges they have locally, what species do they have locally, what's their patrol day like, kind of learning, that. And then in some places we'll plan in an extra day. And we did this when we were in Nazca and Cusco in Peru. So in Cusco, of course, we went to Machu Picchu. And we met with the rangers there and got a tour from the rangers at Machu Picchu in a couple of the parks there where we'll actually spend an extra day. And those are always welcome when you can stay in the same hotel or the same campsite 2 nights in a row and get a shower, maybe. That's a beautiful thing. And so we will spend time then going hiking with the rangers, and they'll take us and they will talk through some of the challenges, and we can see firsthand the condition of their equipment. We can see, if when we're lucky, some of the species, that they're protecting. And I remember Mongolia 2019 when we saw the endangered antelope that they were protecting there from a distance running. We were able to see them, and there aren't that many times you get to see the endangered species like that. And even in Chitwan, to be able to go on the tour with the rangers to see the crocodiles, and we saw the rhino, we saw the bear, and some of the other species there. Those are just also so unforgettable for so many of the riders, and really anchors why you're doing what you do. Because not only, the rangers, of course, and meeting them, that personal human to human connection, but when you can sit in the Altai Mountains and look at petroglyphs that are 40,000 sometimes years old, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that has some of the longest recorded history, in humankind. You can see that with your own eyes and experience it yourself. It's extraordinarily, again, transformative and moving and just reinforces, the whole thing. So that's why, again, we make sure that's you want 10 days. You want to be able to go with the rangers to see their park, to learn about the species, to see them firsthand. That's all part of it. We're not yucking it up on bikes, just just flying around the countryside, like that's another image that people have, right? Especially in North America when they see dirt bikes and they're just out kind of tearing it up and having fun
Some hooligans.
recreationally. Yeah. This is all about the experience and delivering a bike in as good a condition as possible. I want to mention that too,
Yeah.
because we actually have an award for anybody who doesn't drop their motorcycle during the course of 10 days, because it's not easy to get through 10 days without dropping a bike, especially in places like Mongolia. But the goal is to deliver a clean bike, not a trashed bike. So all that combined, those experiences in the parks with the rangers and how we ride is really a big part of each journey.
How do you address that if, you beat up your bike a little bit on the way there? What's the protocol when you get there in terms of, maintenance and things like that, and handing that over to the ranger so they can take care of it?
Well, I can use myself as an example because I delivered one of the most damaged bikes in the history of Rally for Rangers in 2015, which was actually a really good year for me because I had learned in 2014 how to do this. And I had not crashed for 9 days on that rally, not once. I was one of only a couple people left on the last day, but I had messed up the rear wheel a little bit because I was kind of bored sitting around at lunch one day and decided I wanted to ride around the shores of this lake where we were and didn't see an old fish net, and it got completely churned and wrapped up in the rear axle, and it took us hours to cut it out. And it was, I think, that same day later in the day that I looked down and I had no gas cap. There was gas just kind of spilling out of my tank. I lost my gas cap. So after the previous gas stop, I didn't put it on tight enough. And we tried to look for 30 minutes for it, because where are you going to get a gas cap in the middle? You're not. And so the Rangers actually fashioned one out of wood and duct tape and pounded it in place. And then on the last day, I had my worst incident of the entire, experience so far, where I was going across kind of a pasture and open grassland, and all of a sudden the ground dropped out from under me. I hit a riverbank that I couldn't see because the far bank of the river was sloped and green. So to the horizon, everything was green. And then just as I'm coming up, all of a sudden I see rocks and rubble, and there's a 6-foot drop off. I just locked my brakes, went over the handlebars and just down on the riverbed, and the bike came down on top of me, and the side of the tank had a huge dimple in it. I limped into camp on that trip feeling pretty low. They ended up finding getting a new gas cap out there eventually. But those things, they're going to happen, but you just try to do your best to ensure, as much that they don't. There are some things like that was nearly unavoidable. The only way that I could have avoided that was simply to have just been to stay on the track. In Mongolia, most everything is pasture because the grazing happens everywhere. So it's not like you're riding off through pristine, national park. And so you're riding where they're riding. The herders are riding when they're herding, the goats and the sheep and the camels and things like that. So, but that being said, had I just stuck to the track, I wouldn't have had that particular incident, So, but things like jumping, everybody just loves to get a little air and, but we don't need to hammer the suspension on the bikes and things like that. And so all of that kind of factors into how we ride and doing our best to give them as good a tool as possible. And then, as I mentioned, each time there's a mechanic with us from the manufacturer where we get the motorcycles. And so in most cases, it's Yamaha mechanics, certainly in Mongolia. And so they go through the whole motorcycle. They're there for the first 500-mile service that's en route. So after a couple of days, 500 miles or so, they do an oil change. They do, that 500-mile service happens in the field, and they do all 15 bikes at night while we're sleeping. That mechanic is doing that work, and the next day we're ready to go. And so then they're there at the end to walk the Rangers through, the whole thing. And that's the other thing, John, I have to say, like the support that it takes to execute something like this, mechanics, cooks, drivers, it's extraordinary, especially in a place like Mongolia where you're sleeping on the ground, you're cooking your own food 3 meals a day, not your own, but I mean, there's a chef with us, and they're just remarkably talented people who can fix anything that breaks down anywhere, any component, I feel like, on any truck. There was one time on the 2021 COVID rally where we got stuck for several hours, fortunately in a town because we needed a welder. and we don't have a welder with us. But we happened to be in a town where we were able to find one, and took several hours to weld part of our support vehicle back together again. So again, you just never know. Flat tires, constantly, and things like that. So it takes an extraordinary team, including the mechanics, to get to the finish safely and successfully.
Yeah, it's quite an amazing journey, and so many amazing people along the way. This is just something I noticed when I was watching that little video, when you're handing over the bikes, there was a gesture that kind of reminded me in South Africa. There's I feel like a bunch of different handshakes that I've learned over the years, but the more like formal one, you kind of rest your left hand underneath your elbow as you're shaking hands. And I saw when everyone's handing over the keys that there was kind of that gesture, a similar gesture. And I don't know if you can talk to that at all, what that represents.
Yeah, there's some of those cultural norms and traditions that you learn about, when you first go over there, as you meet someone. And that goes back, is my understanding, again, back to the days of the Khans, back to the days when warfare was the norm, that was a gesture of sublimating yourself to someone else, of not, that reaching out with both hands was an aggressive gesture. And there's also then again how you drink. What's vodka everywhere all the time? And for people who don't drink, like you will notice in some of the film footage where someone will dip their ring finger into the vodka and spread it to the four winds. And that was something that used to be done with the ring and the vodka in drinks for testing poison, and again, all goes back to that ancient warfare and traditions of the nomadic cultures and the Khans and so on, and that are carried through to this day. There's a scene in the film with each motorcycle being blessed with milk being poured over the front tire as they go down, again, as a tradition of blessing, and the milk that you drink, but also milk that you bless with. And so vodka and the arag, the fermented mare's milk, are standard in ceremony, as are the scarves, that we tie and we hang over. We tie the scarves on our bicycle, prayer scarves. So many of those traditions, that you just would never otherwise even be aware of as part of that journey. So I appreciate you caught that, because again, anyone who travels widely knows that you want to honor the host, as best you can. And we ingrain that in our volunteers as well. You are not, again, on vacation. You are a volunteer for Rally for Rangers, for the Mongol Ecology Center. You're representing not just your own culture, but the organization and the culture that you're in. And so we've actually sent people home from rallies because of breaking, cultural norms and disrespect. Like, we take this incredibly seriously, as safely as, or as importantly as we take our safety and things like that. So yeah, that's exactly right. And it's also part of the fun, is integrating into the culture and learning some of those things, and then bringing some of that culture home with you. I've got some of those prayer scarves and paintings and, art from Nepal and Mongolia and elsewhere, in my office and here at home. And it's really impactful.
Yeah, there's so many layers to the experience, from the culture to the beauty of the landscapes to the work the Rangers are doing. I want to dig into your film as we wrap up, but before that, how did you get here? Can you talk a little bit about, where you grew up, what your path has been like, some of the work you've done in the past?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I grew up in Michigan, and I was born in West Michigan, and we traveled national parks and stuff when I was younger. My dad, was a hunter, fisherman, and even his family traveled. I've got these pictures of my dad's family in Sequoia National Park in the 1950s, and traveling all the way from Michigan, out to California, and there, all of that. And so I came upon that kind of interest and passion through my family and my dad's travels. The motorcycling, not so much. That was a thing for me when I was younger, but not for my family. So I still have my childhood bed sheet. It's a brown and white checkered sheet with images of all different kinds of MotoGP, motocross riding, and it's out in my garage. That I had a bed sheet. That was what I wanted, was a motorcycle bed sheet. I had posters of Evel Knievel and motocross riders on my walls. Never rode a motorcycle until after I was 20 years old. But apparently I was a motorcyclist before I was a motorcyclist, right? So that was always part of me. And then finally got my first Harley Davidson when I was 22, 23 years old. And so both of those things, I guess, were kind of organically part of who I am. And going through school, I still didn't know about what I wanted to do. Through graduate school, I finally discovered the field of interpretation and education in public land. and did an internship at Rocky Mountain National Park when I was in graduate school in 1989 as an interpreter there, a volunteer, and was able to work with the bighorn sheep and keeping them safe, working with the elk and the elk rut in the fall, doing wildlife programs, geology programs, and just was like, this is it. This is what I want to do. And was able to be hired the next year as a seasonal park ranger and actually wear the uniform, wear the flat hat, put on the badge and be a protector of these things for the first time and an educator about these things for the first time. And I knew that was it for me. So I got my first permanent job shortly after that at Fort Vancouver National Historic Site, which is a small Hudson's Bay Company fur trading post on the Columbia River near Portland, Oregon. From there, I went to Mount Rainier, so I got back to a big natural area, and that was really where my heart was in the large kind of western parks like Mount Rainier, and engaged in, some of the mountaineering there and just learned more about that life there. Then went back to Ohio, actually, for a few years at Cuyahoga Valley National Park, which is not on most people's radar.
I've camped there once. I'm not.
Did you really?
I grew up maybe an hour from there, like near Youngstown. So yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And my wife is from the Cleveland area, from Westlake, Ohio, and so when we started our family, it was like let's be close to family, and so Cuyahoga Valley was a place where I could learn a lot about partnerships, urban parks, and kind of grow my awareness and understanding of the national parks. And then from there, we went to Yosemite National Park, and that's really where we raised our kids. We spent 15 years in Yosemite. I was a ranger there and became the chief of interpretation there. My wife was a teacher at the Yosemite School. My kids went to the Yosemite, the elementary school, and then they went to high school there. And so 15 years in Yosemite was really remarkable. And as I mentioned, getting to know the folks in the Mongolia Ecology Center while I was there was a life-changing, time for me. And then when the kids were graduated and moved on to college, the opportunity came up to work in Washington, D.C. in the national office. And so that's where I've been ever since 2016, is working in the National Park Service office in D.C. as well. So, and the motorcycle thing is just more, like I said, I was a street rider at Harley Davidson and BMW street bikes. And then in 2014, I was like, this is really what I want to do. So I became an off-road enthusiast. But there was a time there from 2015 through maybe 2018 that I didn't have a motorcycle. The only time that I rode a motorcycle was in Mongolia. And I used to tell people, I own 4 bikes. They're all in Mongolia with park rangers.
That's so cool.
So I would go over there, I would ride for 2 weeks, I would come home, do fundraising, maybe borrow a motorcycle, but I didn't actually own a motorcycle. And then finally purchased an off-road or a dual sport BMW GS, and just kind of got all fully into the off-road riding community. And that's been also a great new community of family and friends, not just the ranger community, but the motorcycling community is incredibly passionate and powerful and thoughtful. And this idea of bringing the environmental protection and motorcycles together is just not something that's done a lot. It's just, again, motorcycles, particularly in our country, are seen often as consumptive and destructive. And yet in so many other parts of the world, they're absolutely necessary for all parts of life.
Yeah.
And just go to any city in Asia, right? Mm-hmm. And look at the millions of motorcycles going from place to place, and you realize they're just a necessity. So it's really been a lot of fun to kind of bring those two things together that don't, for a lot of people, naturally belong together, at least around here, and start dotting those lines. It's been really special.
Yeah, it's such an amazing journey. And I feel like that could be like a whole other podcast on that journey. But I mean, is it typical for someone to go to that many different places in their career as a park ranger? Very, very typical. This is both a blessing and a curse, I think. For some who have wanderlust like me, I like to move around, and I have other friends and like to work. And some have worked in as many as 20 different parks during the course of a 40-year career. But some people just want to stay. And it's very difficult to advance if you stay. That's one of the challenges. I was fortunate in Yosemite to matriculate through several jobs to become the chief of interpretation there. But most of the time you have to leave to do that. So in order to get to your next level, you have to go to another place. So it is pretty common, but it can be difficult for families, for couples to pick up and move. And so we try to do dual career opportunities for people and things like that too sometimes. So, but it is kind of the norm, I think, in the National Park Service for people to go from place to place. at least you're hopping from one beautiful place to the next. I mean,
well, there aren't any, of the 424 units, there's not a bad one. I mean,
yeah.
People ask me what my favorite park is quite often and are surprised when I say it's Sleeping Bear Dunes. That is in northern Michigan and near Traverse City. And I go there if I can every year. And it is just fabulous. But that's having worked in Denali. And I didn't mention I spent 4 months working as the superintendent in Denali National Park in Alaska. But wow. Sleeping Bear Dunes is kind of my home place.
Yeah, I mean, I think for people too that aren't from the U.S., we got a lot of South African, UK listeners, people from around the world, and the United States, we're really blessed that we have so many beautiful places to go and so many amazing wild spaces that vary in terrain by so much. So yeah. So getting back to Rally for Rangers as we wrap up here, why did you guys decide to do a film? How did that come about, and what are you hoping to achieve with it?
Yeah, we've done at least a short film project every time because this is one of those ways, number one, to raise awareness. It's a bit of a reward for the people who are involved, right? To be shown and featured and have the footage. It's such a compelling visual story that we've just invested each time. So that first year, I just did it myself. I have my little 40-minute personal GoPro film that I did with my kind of personal diary. The second year, we hired a Mongolian film outfit and did a short that's available online as well. In 2017, a different filmmaker yet for the 2017 rally. And then it was really in 2018 that we got connected with Fisher Creative. So just a month before the 2018 Mongolia rally, it was June of 2018, we had an agreement with a film company that fell apart and we were stuck. We were like, we've gotten, we also have a photographer, Phil Bond, a private photographer who came along as a still photographer on many of our rallies, who's done tremendous work for us. You can see in our Instagram and everywhere else. But so in addition to Phil Bond, it just so happened that Fisher Creative was wrapping up a film shoot on an expedition in the Gobi Desert in 2018. And we're in Mongolia. And we got connected through a mutual friend in the Explorers Club. And they met with Wesley, my partner over there, and said, you know what, we'll send somebody. We've got somebody, we'll send somebody. And so just one person they sent that year. And that began a partnership with them that lasted, through today. And so they then captured every rally and they said, well, instead of doing 2014 video, 2015 film, 2017 film, we need to tell the whole story. We need to do a feature documentary that talks about the Rangers and that talks about Rally for Rangers. And so Fisher Creative, who has done work from Everest to the Ukraine, was just the right outfit to do this work. And so they've created this film that they embedded with the Rangers in northern Mongolia. They followed them on poaching patrols, interviewed them, talked about their life and their work. And then interspersed with that is the story of Rally for Rangers, including some animation elements in the film that we were like, some of these things just can't be told, or we don't necessarily want to show, a decapitated elephant, but we can represent that in some other way. And same thing with some of the ranger stories. We don't have stories of rangers arresting poachers. We don't have that captured on film. We capture it through animation. And so they just put this beautiful package together that's now an award-winning documentary film that we're just running through the film festival circuit this year. So it's won Best Picture at the Colorado Environmental Film Festival. It's won some other awards. It'll be in more film festivals throughout the year. We're showing it at rallies, like the Horizons Unlimited meetings, the Overland Expo Film Festival, and other events like that, where it can be seen during the course of this year. And then eventually it'll be available online as well. But yeah, it's the only way to really capture the full essence of what we do, the danger of it, the thrill of it, the emotion of it, the cause, the purpose, the challenges. As you know, as a filmmaker, it's really the best way to do storytelling is capturing through film. And so we're really excited to get it out and to get people to see it.
Yeah, it's extremely exciting, and I definitely can't wait to see it. Is there a way people can look up and see where it's going to be screening in the near future? Do you have?
Yeah, I think just going to rallyforrangers.org, following us on Instagram, as we and Facebook are places where we announce the upcoming screenings as well. And so we'll continue, to kind of add places where it can be seen as time goes on. So we encourage everybody to check the website. Definitely follow us on social media because you can get some of the content there too. We have a YouTube channel that has some of the footage from previous years as well. And then, again, following us through the new journeys this year. year, which includes, our first ever North American rally. And by the way, you've mentioned bicycling a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
Our rally in the Black Hills in September has a gravel cycling component. It's not just motorcycles. So, if you want to get out and ride gravel and support Rally for Rangers, and come on up to the Black Hills in September.
Yeah, I like that. That sounds very intriguing. I'll be following you guys and figuring out when I can join on one of these for sure. It's going to happen. I feel like it's such an amazing program you've created, and yeah, just the beautiful stories, the adventures, the good that's being done. It's kind of a combination of everything you could want in something like this.
Yeah. Well, and I also want your listeners to know that they are going to have an opportunity to win a trip to join us. We've never done this before, but we are going to launch a sweepstakes to give away a $15,000 trip to Mongolia to go on Rally for Rangers, either on a motorcycle or in a support vehicle. So you too, John, can buy a ticket and see if you want to join us. But we're going to launch that sweepstakes here in the next week or two, and so people can hopefully join us that way as well. And that, again, every ticket purchased supports getting more equipment to more park rangers. So we're excited about all of that. It's going to be a big year for us.
Yeah, so definitely check out rallyforrangers.org for all of this good stuff. To finish up, what drives you to keep doing this work throughout your career, this work with Rally for Rangers? When you wake up in the morning, what gets you excited to keep doing this?
And I think I said this earlier, either while we were chatting beforehand or not, but it's not what I do for a living, it's what I live to do. And that just couldn't be more true. That idea of, and I've stopped going on the international trips now to focus on the USA stuff and to try to help grow the brand and grow support for the organization, because it's not just about the adventure travel. At first, it was kind of that lure of the adventure travel and supporting rangers along the way. Then I would say it became more about my understanding of those rangers and their needs, and more about the rangers and less about the travel. And now it's really just about helping facilitate as many people as possible going to support these rangers. And so seeing the impact, another thing that's featured in the film and that we've talked about is that 2 of the motorcycles in Mongolia were burned by poachers. And that was one of the signals that, this is working. We're having an impact, right? We're a threat now to what the poachers are trying to do. And so you can see it's working, and that inspires you to do more. Like you see the rangers, you hear their stories. And so I'm inspired every day, to help advance the work and get more people involved and engaged, because it's just so close to me personally for my work as a ranger. My belief in how the whole global system of environmental protectors needs to come together more and more. People like you, the Rhino Man movie and project, all the other NGOs, the International Ranger Federation, Thin Green Line, right? WWF. There are so many doing this work, and we just need to drive more support to all of these organizations. That just continues to inspire me, because we continue to see the poaching. We continue to see rangers killed by poachers. This is something that it continues to be a scourge worldwide. And so there's part of it's that anger and that fire. Part of it's seeing the lack of resources, and part of it is seeing that it does make a difference, that we have had success, that we see species coming off the endangered species list. We see reductions in poaching in a lot of places. And so we know that our work is making a difference. So those are the things that just, continue to keep me fired up and moving forward.
Well, Tom, I think that's a beautiful way to end it. I mean, your story and the work that you're doing with Rally for Rangers is extremely inspiring. And I just have so much love in my heart for Rangers. So this is a really special project to me. So thank you so much for spending the time to tell your story and to get other people inspired to join in.
You bet. And thank you again for your work. And I look forward to doing more of it together.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you for listening to the Rhino Man podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you're excited to see the film succeed, please subscribe and review our podcast on Spotify and iTunes. Then follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Rhino Man the Movie. More details about Rhino Man, the social impact campaign, and future screenings are at rhinomanthemovie.org. To learn more about the Global Conservation Corps and their work, visit globalconservationcorps.org. Sign up for the newsletter and follow GCC on all of the social platforms. If you like this podcast, make sure to subscribe and catch up on GCC's Voices of Nature podcast, where Bob Ludke interviews a wide range of people who have dedicated their lives to making a difference in conservation. A special thanks goes out to Simón Wilson for the music for this podcast. He's the brilliant composer for Rhino Man the Movie. Learn more about his work at simonwilsonmusic.com. Until next time, I'm John Jerko, and this is the Rhino Man Podcast.